Our first guest has one of the most intriguing jobs in the world. She is the private secretary to the wife in one of the most public families in the world. She is the private secretary to Mrs. Richard Nixon. And we'll have some questions to ask her as soon as we've said hello to our panel here on Tell the Truth. Tom Kennedy. Peggy Cass. Bill Cullen. And Kitty Carlisle. Panel, I got more pictures to show you on this show. Now, let me get this first one out here. I'd like to show you a picture of President Nixon and his family in a very private moment at dinner in the family dining room of the White House.
Yeah.
There you are. You can see that the president is waiting for a Big Mac, and Pat is waiting for a large order of French fries. Be along in just a moment. And our first guest is quite familiar with this particular room, because our first guest is Mrs. Nixon's press secretary. Mm-hmm. And let us meet her right now.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Connie Stewart.
Number two.
My name is Connie Stewart.
Number three.
My name is Connie Stewart.
And here is Connie Stewart's own personal press release. It goes as follows. I, Connie Stewart, am staff director and press secretary to Mrs. Richard Nixon. It is my job to answer the 101 questions that the press wants to know about the first family. For example, at the time of Tricia Nixon Cox's wedding, there were over 700 members of the press, all asking about menu, decorations, wedding guests, and honeymoon plans. It was my job to supply accurate answers. When the First Lady takes an official trip, my duties are extensive. I had been privileged to accompany her to such faraway places as Moscow, Peru, and Africa. I also assist in the entertaining of such celebrated visitors as England's Prince Charles and Princess Anne. Realistically speaking, probably my most important duty is to try to preserve some degree of privacy for the most public family in the world. Signed, Connie Stewart. And we'll be back to start the questioning right after paying off our own share of the national debt.
We're searching for game show sounds in their natural habitat. She's attracting a mate. Oh, here's a cheeky fellow. Call of the wild. Explore buzzer. It's as good as it sounds.
Oh, Stewart, press secretary to Mrs. Richard Nixon. And why don't we start our own press conference right here with reporter Kitty Carlisle.
Thank you. Number one, what were your qualifications for this glorious job?
A journalism background.
And number two, were you a personal friend of Mrs. Nixon's?
No.
Oh, you just got the job because you were qualified?
Yes.
Number three, how do you ensure a certain amount of privacy for the Nixons?
It's very, very difficult to do that.
Well, how do you do it?
Well, they do have private moments. There are times when they are away from the White House, for instance, and I'm not even with them. So.
Thank you. Number two, where do you live? Do you live nearby?
I live in southern Maryland.
And number one, do you have any particular hours, or are you on call all the time?
Unfortunately, no.
Thank you. Number two, when you go away with Mrs. Nixon, who does she take with her? A hairdresser, a personal maid, what?
It really does all depend where we're going and what the purpose of the trip is.
Well, let's say to Moscow.
To Moscow. There were two of us who accompanied her on that trip.
No hairdresser?
You got half a nod and the buzzer rang and it stopped right there. And it stopped. And so we get on to Tom Kennedy.
All right, number three, when Mrs. Nixon took you in her employ, did you have to sign any particular kind of contract as to refraining from writing books about your experiences later?
Yes. There is a sort of tacit agreement that is made.
And number one, how long have you been, is it executive secretary or press secretary or both?
Press secretary.
How long have you been?
3.5 years.
And Do you ever have, number two, do you ever have any problem with the security men? I mean, they do have to be careful about everyone. And have you ever been barred from coming into a particular hotel or anything, and then you have to explain yourself away?
Oh, sometimes when we're out where some local security people are providing the security. Yes, I've had my moments
Number
too.
three, do you have a security badge or something that tells who you are?
No, not a badge.
All right. And number one, what did you say, 3.5 years?
Yes.
How did she pick you from a number of people interviewed for the job?
It wasn't a formal interview. I worked in the campaign and knew her that way.
You have a southern accent?
And that takes us, please, to Peggy Cash.
Thank you. Number three, where did you work before you became Mrs. Nixon's press secretary?
Well, I was in California, and I worked on the campaigns in California, actually. That's how I got to know her.
I mean, what papers had you worked on? What newspapers?
Oh, I didn't work on newspapers. I worked on magazines.
Which ones?
Well, in Los Angeles.
Oh. Well, I mean, you're talking about as a campaign, but I mean, did you ever work for a publication as such?
Yes, I did. I worked on a magazine in Los Angeles.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, number two, did you? Who's your vis-a-vis of Mr. Nixon's staff? Who has your job?
The president's press secretary
Yes.
is Ron Ziegler.
Oh, I just wondered if that was who it was. That's all. I know him. He's a nice fellow. Number one, I think it's perfectly terrific that Mrs. Nixon takes this hairdresser along, and she should always take one along. They don't know how to do your hair in those countries. Bet you're trying to get your hair done in China. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Of course you should have one.
Well, that was one of the best questions you ever asked.
You're always taking contracts about having a secretary or something, about having a hairdresser. She should have a hairdresser.
Sure.
And I'm a Democrat.
I didn't say she shouldn't, Peggy, if you'll
Okay.
recall. I didn't say a word about that. I think she should.
right.
And anything else you wanted to take.
Me?
Yeah. Let's go to Bill Cullen.
Well, I've learned number three doesn't have a badge, and you can't get your hair set in those countries. And that's I've learned number one. How many people are there that the Nixons themselves have to employ? I mean, with secretaries and press people and things like that, it must be quite a staff. Number one, is it not?
Well, it's a sizable staff.
And am I correct? And perhaps it's none of my affair, but might be an invasion of privacy. But does the Nixon family pay you out of their own funds, or is that a government job?
Well, it's not an actual government-rated job, if you mean that, but it's obviously part of the White House operating expenses.
It's not a personal expense then for the
no.
president and his family.
No.
Number two, that dining room we saw, is that dining room in the upstairs private apartment of the Nixons at the White House?
Yes.
That is now.
All right, Bill, you had a good question. We never got to it. The bell rang, and on that basis, you must mark your ballots. And you must choose between number one or number two or...
We asked our members, why did you switch to U.S.
that we pay $50 to our team of challengers for each wrong vote. We pay $500 if they stump the panel altogether. And Kitty starts.
They were all wonderful. I have no idea. I voted for number one because I think she knew sort of about the financial setup, but then she was the only one asked, so I don't know.
All righty, Tom Kennedy.
I voted for number two because she answered like a reporter with that terseness and that preciseness.
Kind of a protectiveness about her?
Yes, a little
All
bit.
right, we got a one and a two and Peggy.
Well, I was really going to vote for number three, but she didn't tell me where she worked. I don't know any magazines in Los Angeles, so I didn't vote for her. But they're all come from Philadelphia. I voted for... Number two does not look as though she's a press secretary, but now number one does.
A pair of ones and a two.
She'd get the tags on that
Bill
bag.
Cullen coming out.
All during the questioning, number two constantly looked like she had heard all these questions before. And on that basis, I voted for number two.
That's a very shrewd observation. That would never have occurred to me. Connie Stewart is not only, some question was asked about when is she on duty. She's not only on duty in Washington, but when the Nixons travel to San Clemente, she's also on call. And I have a picture here of Connie Stewart and Mrs. Nixon in the courtyard of the California White House. So by way of revealing her identity, let me show you the picture. And so will the real Connie Stewart please stand up. And there she is. Thank you, Mrs. Stewart, very much. Let's find out who your friends are. Number one, what is your real name? What do you do?
My name is Lee McGrath, and I'm a fashion consultant for Sarah Coventry Jewelry.
How about them? And number three, votes or no. You're cute.
Thank you.
What is your real name? What do you do?
My name is Pat Brown, and I'm a housewife from Los Angeles, California.
Yeah. Now, a job at the White House is not only very busy, but a highly responsible position, but the setting for the work is certainly lovely. And here are Connie and Mrs. Nixon at work. Connie Stewart, can you tell me about this picture? Where is it? Where,
Yes, that's Mrs. Nixon's sitting room on the second floor of the White House, and actually that photograph was taken in a mirror, so that's a reflection of the two of us standing in front of her window that looks out over the South Lawn and the Washington Monument.
Well, but that's one that you're going to keep for your own personal collection, isn't it? A great picture. Mrs. Stewart, thank you very much, and thank you, gals, for being with us on To Tell the Truth. Take care.
Your hands sweat, your legs ache, and all this for a 4-foot salami. Supermarket Sweep, today at 10:30.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Bob Ferrone.
Number two.
My name is Bob Ferrone.
Number three.
My name is Bob Ferrone.
And I don't know if they knew each other before the show, but they must know each other very well by now. Here is the extraordinary story of Bob Ferrone. It says, I, Bob Ferrone, boxed myself in a crate to see a girl. Why? Well, with a 4-day college vacation coming up, I yearned to see my girlfriend. Unfortunately, she was approximately 1,700 miles away, and I could not afford to fly unless, that's it, unless I was sent as freight. I decided to fly in a box labeled pottery, so the airlines would have to handle me with care. Then a friend of mine wanted to go along too. Okay, I said, but we can't be pottery, we weigh too much. We'll be Honda racing motorcycles. And so off we went. For nearly 7 hours, we sat in an old piano crate facing each other in total darkness, sometimes straight up, sometimes on our side, but fortunately never upside down. When we landed, a friend picked us up in a U-Haul. Finally, uncrated and unbowed, I went to see my lady fair. And she must have appreciated the effort I made because later on, she married me. Signed, Bob Ferrone. I think any girl would have to appreciate a spot like this, Peggy. Well,
I think it's adorable.
you just sitting there with that smarmy look on your face.
I really think that that's really swell. Number one, since you were such expensive things, Honda motorcycle bikes or whatever, so why didn't nobody tried to steal you?
No.
Nobody did?
No one did.
Number three, were you handled with care?
Pretty much so. I would say sometimes we tilted one way or another.
But now, how long before they put you up into the plane? I mean, how long did you sit on the ground just being a Honda motorcycle before you got up in the plane?
Well, I would say when we started off, we were in the box, I would say, before we got on, maybe 15, 20 minutes. But at the other end, we were there for much longer.
But that's really terrific. You didn't dare break out at the other end. You had to wait till you got really carted away.
Very much so.
What would they have done, number three, at the other end if you had suddenly popped out?
I don't know.
Number two, what was the weather like when you flew this flight?
It's beautiful.
Well, I mean, was it winter? Well, number one, I thought that where they put the baggage was not, you could freeze to death down there.
Well, it's pressurized just like the passenger compartment. It's the same atmospheric conditions, the same temperature and the same pressure.
Number one, were there any animals down there with you, like dogs or cats or lions?
No.
You were just ordinary Honda motorcycles.
Right. All those motorcycles together. Bill?
Hey, Bob, it's a sensational idea. It was 1,700 miles. How much did it cost to have yourself shipped as a motorcycle to where your girl was? Number three.
I think it was about $30-40 somewhere around there.
And how much would it have cost if you had gone as a passenger?
It would have been about $100.
That's a pretty good idea.
Gee, I don't...
When you got married, where were you shipped on your honeymoon, Bob? No, actually, it's pretty... Number one, you went with a friend of yours in this box for 7 or 8 hours, is that right?
Right.
What did you talk about in the box? Or did you have to be quiet? Was there anyone down there near you?
No, we brought a radio, which it didn't work, and we talked, and we both bought a couple things to read, but it was sort of jumpy.
Yeah, I guess so. Number two, you mentioned it was pressurized down there where you were. Did you make very positive that you knew it was going to be pressurized and reasonably warm before you did that?
Well, I called up using an assumed voice, and I called up and I asked if I could ship an animal in a cage. And they said it would be okay. The animal would survive, the same conditions that the people was in.
I see.
All righty, and that takes us, please, to Kitty.
It's fascinating. Number one, did you ever read Caesar and Cleopatra by Shakespeare?
No, I didn't.
That's not how you got the idea?
No.
Cleopatra had herself shipped into Caesar wrapped in a rug.
Well, I just wanted to go someplace, and it was a cheap way to go. So.
Number two, who actually put you on the... Who put you into the airport when you were already in the crate?
That's a good question. We had friends from the campus, and they took us down in a pickup truck to the airport and gave us to the freight people at the airport.
Yeah, I see. Number three, were you insured?
I should have been. I'm worth a lot. I know that.
Number one, what happened to your friend? Did he get married too?
No, he's still single.
He's still in the box.
And Tom Kennedy, what do you want to know?
Well, about that friend, what was her name? No, number one, how can you read if you're in a crate?
Oh, well, it was the crate is pretty high. I mean, we were sitting down and we had flashlights.
The crate is pretty high.
Well, I mean, we were sitting down and we had about
And you
3.5
had flashlights,
feet.
so that's the
Right.
answer. Number two, have you heard from the airlines since this incident?
Well, now I'm sure that we'll hear from the airlines.
And number three, did you have any padding in that? How did you dress?
Well, I got in after a gymnastics class, but I sat on my clothes. We laid them down at the bottom cushion.
Okay, and number two, did you go from east to west or west to east?
Well, actually from Denver Airport to Philadelphia International Airport by way of Chicago.
And number one, what time of year was that?
There was no...
It was ding-dong time. Bell rang. No more questions. Mark the ballots based on the questions you have asked. Our choice is number one, or number two, or number three. And Miss Cass, please.
Well, they're all very nice and everything, but the one that would fit the most into the box is very lithe, slim number one, so I voted for him. I wouldn't mind seeing him coming out of the box at the airport.
Nice uncrating job. You got a one going there, and Bill Cullen.
That's funny. I picture number three as the one most likely to be found in a packing crate with a friend, reading a book by a flashlight, so I pick number three.
One on both ends, and Kitty.
That's funny. I picked number two.
That's your privilege. That's the name of the game. We're all the way across the board. Tom Kennedy visiting is going to
there's no
cast
doubt. There's no doubt. Look at that look on number three. I've never seen a more devilish look in all my life. It's got to be him. He's got that kind of a sense of humor.
You're positive, Tom.
No doubt about it.
All right. Now, I think it's only right that Bob's wife, who was the inspiration for this thing, comes out here and identifies her husband. Maybe by looking at her, you can tell. You know, sort of pair them up in your mind.
Crazy.
Huh? Well, let's call on Mrs. Nancy Farone right now. Nancy, come out. You recognize him, you know.
Oh, there's Nancy.
Number
Oh,
one.
son. Very good job, all up and down the board there. Let's find out about our friends. Number one, what's your real name? What do you do?
My name is David Summers, and I run a boarding house on the east side of Manhattan.
How about that? Good. Number two, sir. What is your real name?
My name is Anton J. Makovsky, and I'm a freelance writer and photographer, and I live in New York and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I just came back from Europe, but not in a box, in the passenger compartment.
Now, Nancy and Bob, I don't want to get you in any trouble, but I was amazed that nobody on the panel asked you the name of the airline upon whom you perpetrated this romantic fraud?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah, I don't insist upon
Okay, it was American Airlines.
And is this the first that American Airlines is hearing about this?
I guess so. I certainly hope so.
Well, friends, I tell you what. Now, we don't want anybody getting sore at this.
Right.
All together, audience, let's all together say American Airlines is a swell airline. American Airlines is a swell airline. Might get you out of trouble. I don't know. Bob, Nancy, friends, thank you very much for being with us. Take care.
This is Bill Wendell speaking for To Tell the Truth, a Mark Goodson, Bill Todman production.